After 22 years of marriage, I finally snapped when my husband let his family hurt my kids, ignore my boundaries, and his brother even hit my dog. I asked for separation, cut off his entire family, and told him our marriage is now just a contract. The backstory is this. I'm 42 now, and my husband, I'll call him DH, is 49. We've been together for 22 years. For the most part, our relationship is strong. We share the same values. We genuinely enjoy each other's company, and he makes me happy. If it were just the two of us, life would be pretty peaceful. The problem has always been his family. From the very beginning, his parents made their expectations clear. They were desperate for grandchildren and, frankly, disappointed in me. I was 7 years younger than their son, ambitious, and deeply invested in a career I loved. I had no intention of becoming a stay-at-home housewife or rushing into motherhood just to fulfill their timeline. That alone seemed to put me on the wrong foot with them. Things escalated after our first son was born. After a grueling week of labor, I ended up needing an emergency C-section. Our baby boy, BB1, then had to spend a week in the NICU. I was exhausted, emotional, and still physically recovering when my mother-in-law looked at me and casually remarked that I still looked so big she was surprised there wasn't another baby inside me. I remember standing there stunned, sore, and vulnerable, realizing in that moment that she didn't see me as someone to support, just someone to criticize. From then on, she constantly pushed boundaries and ignored my role as BB1's mother. One of the first big incidents happened when BB1 was under 3 months old. He was sick, fussy, and clearly wanted me, but Emile insisted that if I just gave him water he'd settle down so she could hold him. I refused. He was a tiny, unwell baby who needed his mother, not outdated advice and forced cuddles. That was when I started pulling back, limiting visits to once every couple of months, just to keep the peace. When our second son, BB2, was born 2 years later, I hoped things might improve. They didn't. That Christmas, BB2's first, we decided we wanted to stay home and start our own traditions. We made it clear that anyone was welcome to join us, and we meant it sincerely. Emile, however, wanted to host Christmas herself and declined our invitation. A week before Christmas, we went to visit them. While we were there, Emile announced she wanted BB1 to open the Christmas present she had bought him. DH and I had already agreed this wouldn't happen. We wanted Christmas morning itself to feel magical. Waking up, seeing the tree, opening presents together as a family. It wasn't a huge ask, just a simple boundary. As we were literally heading out the door to leave, Emile suddenly shoved the present toward BB1 and encouraged him to open it right then. I stepped in, took the gift gently, and repeated that we'd agreed presents would be opened on Christmas Day. Instantly, the tears started. Full-on crocodile tears. DH rushed to comfort his mom while my father-in-law and brother-in-law turned on me. They raised their voices, accusing me of being cruel, of upsetting Emile, of ruining everything. Instead of supporting me, DH's resolve crumbled the moment his mom cried. He sided with them, and suddenly I was standing there alone, being painted as the villain for sticking to a decision we had made together. I didn't back down. We left without the presents. Emile kept them, and the drive home was awful. The 3-hour journey felt endless as DH stayed cold and critical, telling me I'd made his mom cry and ruined Christmas. Even after we got home, the tension lingered for hours. I remember sitting there wondering if I had married the wrong person, questioning everything. Eventually, DH did apologize. In the new year, Emile and Fil met up with us to finally hand over the boys' Christmas gifts. But there was no apology for the shouting, the pressure, or the complete disregard for me as a parent. After that, I shifted into survival mode. I stayed polite but distant. I kept interaction civil for the sake of DH and the kids, but emotionally I built a wall. The next significant time we all spent together was during a family day out. It started off normally enough, just an outing with the grandparents. Then, Fil accidentally spilled a cup of boiling tea over BB1. It soaked his arm, chest, and leg. I'll never forget the sound of his scream, or the sight of his skin reddening almost instantly. Thankfully, because we were at an event, there was a paramedic on site, who rushed to help. For the next 2 hours, BB1 was treated for burns, cooling treatments, dressings, constant checks. I stayed focused on him, trying to keep him calm, trying to hide my own panic. DH still couldn't see a problem with his parents' behavior after the incident with the burns. Maybe that was because it was me holding BB1 while he cried in pain for 2 hours as the paramedic treated him. Maybe it felt less real to him, because he wasn't the one feeling our son shake in his arms. Thankfully, BB1 healed with no physical scarring, but even now, almost 12 years later, he still remembers how much it hurt. That memory never really left him, and honestly, it never left me either. For a brief moment, I thought things might improve when my sister-in-law finally had a baby. I assumed MIL and FIL would pour their energy into their new grandchild and ease off my boys. I couldn't have been more wrong. SIL's son, I'll call him SB, is about 3.5 years younger than BB1 and just under a year and a half younger than BB2. From the moment SB was old enough to point at things and scream for them, the favoritism was impossible to ignore. If SB saw one of my boys holding a toy, he would simply point and shriek. Without hesitation, MIL or FIL would swoop in, take the toy from my child, and hand it straight to SB. It didn't matter if it was a shared toy, a favorite toy, or even something my boys had brought from home. If SB wanted it, SB got it. What hurt almost as much as their behavior was DH's silence. He stood there and let it happen, as if this was all perfectly normal. I did what I could to protect my children. I reduced contact even more, limiting visits to just 3 or 4 times a year, usually for only a couple days at a time. But even with that distance, things didn't improve. Once SB could talk, the situation escalated. He didn't just demand toys anymore, he demanded control. He would insist my boys play whatever game he wanted, chase him around, let him win, or hand over whatever they were using. And whenever I wasn't physically right there, MIL and FIL would try to enforce it. It honestly felt like I couldn't even step away to use the bathroom or prepare food without worrying about what would happen while I was gone. I found myself constantly hovering, watching, intervening, not relaxing for a single minute. It became painfully clear just how deep this mindset ran when SB got a younger brother, NC. During a family meal out, NC was about 8 months old, happily playing with a small baby toy. SB decided he wanted it. Without a second thought, MIL took the toy straight out of the baby's hands and gave it to SB, declaring that NC needed to learn how to share. I remember sitting there stunned. No one corrected her. No one questioned it. To the entire in-law family, this was apparently normal. My boys, bless them, reacted with more kindness than the adults. They felt sorry for NC and made an effort to include him in their games whenever possible. They enjoyed spending time with him and treated him gently. But this only seemed to irritate the in-laws, and SB even more. SB remained spoiled, and MIL and FIL doubled down, sometimes trying to punish my children if they didn't give in to whatever SB wanted. These attempts usually happened when I stepped away briefly, like during bathroom breaks or while sorting out food for the kids. Unsurprisingly, my boys grew to dislike spending time with MIL and FIL. As SB has gotten older, he's matured a little, and the boys will include him sometimes. But the moment he slips back into bratty behavior, they naturally pull away again. I can't blame them. DH has improved somewhat over the years. He does step in more now, and will defend the boys when something is clearly unfair. But there are still no real consequences for his parents' behavior. No boundaries that actually stick. No meaningful pushback that would make them reconsider how they treat our children. This past Christmas was the moment everything finally tipped over. BIL and his partner now have a 6-month-old baby, LB, and we were all gathered at my in-laws' house for the holiday visit. At one point, LB dropped a small toy onto the floor. My dog, who is large but incredibly gentle and calm, wandered over and simply sniffed it. He didn't grab it, didn't chew it, didn't growl, just sniffed it the way any curious dog would. Without a single word of warning, BIL suddenly lashed out and hit my dog. Hard. Not once, but 3 times in quick succession. The sound alone made my stomach drop. My dog yelped and ran straight under the table to hide beside me, trembling. That was the only reason BIL stopped. If my dog hadn't retreated to me, I honestly don't know if he would have kept going. DH did tell him to stop, but it felt half-hearted and far too late. I was frozen in shock, completely speechless. I genuinely couldn't process that someone could explode into violence like that over nothing, over a dog sniffing a baby toy on the floor. What stunned me even more was what happened next. Absolutely nothing. BIL just carried on as if it had never happened. No apology. No acknowledgement. No embarrassment. No one in the family confronted him or even seemed particularly bothered. It was like I was the only one who thought it was horrifying. I quietly asked DH if we could leave. I told him I didn't feel safe staying in the same house as someone who could suddenly attack an animal like that. He ignored me. Completely. He refused to leave. Since we were staying overnight, I did the only thing I felt I could do. I spent the day making sure I stayed away from BIL as much as possible, keeping the kids and the dog close to me, so I could feel some sense of safety. When we returned to the house later, I shut the dog into the sitting room with me and BB1. It was the only room in the house with a door where the dog was allowed, and it felt like the only place I could control the environment. I have CFS/me, and by that point I was utterly exhausted. I lay down in the sitting room and must have fallen asleep almost immediately. At some stage, MIL and FIL came into the room and began talking loudly and moving around. BB1, trying to be considerate, politely asked them if they could keep the noise down because I was asleep and unwell. Instead of responding with understanding, MIL snapped back saying, "That's her problem, and she could have gone upstairs." That upset BB1, and he answered back rudely, something he rarely does, but he was already stressed and protective. The raised voices woke me up just as DH came into the room, but he didn't step in or calm the situation. I could see BB1 was extremely upset, so I took him upstairs to the bedroom so he could calm down and tell me what had happened. It's worth noting that my in-laws' house is very large, with multiple comfortable seating areas, but almost all of them are open plan. The sitting room is one of the few spaces with an actual door, which is why I had chosen it in the first place. After BB1 explained everything to both me and DH, I again said I wanted to leave. By this point, it wasn't just about my dog's safety. I felt deeply uncomfortable about the way MIL had spoken and the complete lack of compassion for either me or my child. Once again, DH ignored my request. Instead, he made BB1 apologize to his parents for being rude. The rest of the evening carried on as if nothing had happened at all. Everyone chatted, watched TV, and behaved like it was a perfectly normal Christmas visit. Meanwhile, I felt tense, hurt, and completely unsupported. The only relief was knowing we were scheduled to leave the next morning. When we finally drove away, it honestly felt less like heading home and more like escaping. And now I'm left wondering, am I the one overreacting? Am I wrong for feeling like this crossed a line? Or is wanting space, and maybe a separation, a reasonable response after feeling so unsupported for so long? I feel like I need to add some clarification because there's a lot of context behind my decision that people don't see. 13 years ago, one of the main reasons I gave my husband a second chance was our children. I was genuinely afraid that if we separated back then, his parents would end up having unrestricted access to them, with no one there to advocate for sensible parenting or to stand up for their well-being. Staying felt like the only way to keep some control and make sure my kids were protected. Since COVID, I've managed to reduce contact with his family to fewer than 10 days a year. To be fair, my husband usually tries to avoid spending time with them or with his brother. Unfortunately, family birthdays aren't always avoidable, and this past Christmas only happened because plans changed at the last minute when his nephew couldn't stay with his other grandparents due to illness. After everything that happened over Christmas, I made a firm decision. There will be no further contact between the in-laws and me, the children, or our dog. That boundary isn't negotiable. My children love their dad and are old enough to see what his family is like. They actually feel sorry for the position he's in. The only person who still struggles to fully see the problem is my husband. The boys have said they'd rather deal with occasional awkwardness from the in-laws than see their parents divorce, but that's not a responsibility I'll ever place on them. Their emotional security matters too much for that. For clarity, my dog being hit was the first and only time anything like that has happened. After it occurred, we kept the dog completely away from my brother-in-law for the rest of the visit. Once home, I told any relatives who might interact with him what had happened. He was angry, but I wasn't going to stay quiet about that kind of behavior. There was also the incident with the boiling tea. It truly was an accident. My father-in-law's sleeve caught the cup and knocked it over onto my son. What upset me wasn't the spill itself, but the response afterward. There was no real acknowledgement or apology to my child. I was raised to believe that if you hurt someone, even accidentally, you apologize to them. My husband thinks his father apologized to him, but our son never received one. Less than 24 hours after posting, I spoke to my husband again and shared some of the responses I'd received. After a long and honest discussion, we've decided to stay married, but not as if nothing happened. From now on, there will be no contact between his family and me, the children, or the dog. He has also agreed to go to counseling and work on himself. Until real change is shown, our relationship will remain more of a marriage in name than in closeness. He says he wants to do this, and I'm willing to give that process a chance. My reasons are straightforward. First, I want to protect our children from his family. Second, I know a divorce right now would hurt them deeply. Our oldest has started his school exam process, and the youngest isn't far behind. This isn't the time to destabilize their lives if it can be avoided. I also think it's important that they see healthy boundaries being set. Cutting toxic people out of your life isn't cruel. Sometimes it's necessary for safety and self-respect. Hopefully they'll never need to do this themselves, but at least they'll understand that protecting yourself is valid. There's also a practical reality. My husband's family is far wealthier than mine. If we divorced, they could easily fund a strong legal team and push for significant custody, even though my husband works away from home several days a week. I fear they would then step in and gain the increased, possibly unsupervised, access I've spent years trying to limit. That's a risk I'm not willing to take. I was honest with my husband about why I stayed years ago. It hurt him, but he understood. I also explained that I couldn't have set these boundaries earlier without risking immediate divorce. The incidents this Christmas, along with our children expressing their own feelings, finally opened his eyes enough to accept them. Protecting my children and my dog has always been my priority. For now, staying feels like the best way to do that. But this isn't an endless second chance. He knows there's a time limit for meaningful change, and in my mind that's about 5 years, long enough for our youngest to reach adulthood and remove any custody concerns. After that, his actions will decide what happens to our marriage.